You're listening to the IBJ Media Podcast Network.
Off the Record with the Indiana 250 Most Influential Hoosiers is brought to you by Prolific, the growth firm. When growth stalls, CEOs turn to Prolific to plan, execute, and achieve what's next.
I had this concept to take this little business and somehow this little idea that I had in consolidating the automotive chemical supply chain came to fruition, and it actually happened. We went from a little company to getting a $10 million contract to getting a $30 million contract, and all of a sudden, yeah, I'm there.
Welcome to Off the Record, a podcast featuring leaders on IBJ Media's Indiana 250 list. I'm Nate Feltman, CEO of IBJ Media, which publishes the Indiana 250, a list of the most influential business people in Indiana. Today, I'm joined by Amish Shah, a Hoosier entrepreneur who is CEO of Elkhart-based Kem Krest, Inc., a supply chain optimization company that serves Fortune 100 companies around the world in a diverse range of industries, including automotive, heavy-duty, power sports, and much more. Almost 30 years now, he has worked to grow Kem Krest into one of Indiana's leading private companies. Amish was also a co-founder of ESGI, a company whose software provides teachers better tools and assessments for reading comprehension. One of his passions is educating future generations of business leaders, especially for Elkhart County, where he calls home, where he helped establish a business hall of fame and has been instrumental in launching the area's chapter of Junior Achievement and Lemonade Day. Hence the lemonade.
Hence the lemonade. This is great.
Amish has served on General Motors Supplier Council, the Harley-Davidson Supplier Council, and the board of Connexus Indiana, an advocate for Indiana's manufacturing logistics industries. He has a bachelor's degree in finance from Indiana University and an MBA from University of Notre Dame. And maybe most importantly, there is no bigger cheerleader for his hometown of Elkhart and entire South Bend Elkhart region than Amish.
Thank you.
He's also a tireless advocate for the entire state, always touting Indiana as a great place to live and a great place to start a business. Amish, so glad to have you on Off the Record podcast, and so happy to see you and call you a fellow person who grew up in northern Indiana like I did.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Nate. And I listen to the podcast. I love it. I'm delighted to be here. So I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
I'm excited. As I mentioned, I grew up in northern Indiana. I went to Penn High School. Yep. You went to Mishawaka Marion, and then you went to a prep school, Lake Forest Academy.
I did, yeah.
You attended IU, like I did as well. And you decided after IU to head back home to hometown of Elkhart, unlike me. So just to start the conversation, talk a little bit about what drew you back to the Elkhart South Bend region. What was it that said, I'm gonna go back home and join a business, grow a business?
There was a sidestep in there. So outside of IU, I moved to London. So I lived in London for 2 years. I was in investment banking. I worked at a Bass Tavern, played guitar on Thursdays.
Nice.
And enjoyed the experience tremendously. And actually, I got my dream job from there. I got a job at then Anderson Consulting, working in their kind of leadership development branch in finance. And my goal, my dream in life was to be like a global investment banker. Like I wanted to make big deals happen. And on my way back from London, I stopped at home in Elkhart, saw my dad, and I was getting ready to move to Chicago. And my father, who started a business back in 1962, actually July of 1962, had said, I can't believe you're not going to work for the family business. Now, that's a whole different podcast on succession planning and family business, but we'd honestly never talked about it. And he was so committed to having me at least give it a try.
Yeah.
I forewent my dream job and worked for him for $26,000 a year. And I didn't want to work for his main business. I grew up in it. It was Acropack. It was the largest contract packager of aerosols and liquids. And I just didn't want to work in that environment. So he had this little bitty tiny baby subsidiary that did less than $1 million. And I said, I'll go hang out over there for a year, and then I'll get back to what
global,
globetrotting. Doing my thing. And frankly, growing up in Elkhart in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, it truly was the land of milk and honey. It was an entrepreneurial mecca. It was, you don't realize it until you start to realize, like, these are
Yeah.
some great people that have done big things. And I so enjoyed the experience, the community, that I'm 22 years old, and these friends of my father's took me under their wing, and they wanted nothing more than to see me be successful.
That's awesome.
And so once you were there, it became such a hard place to leave because you saw the arms of support that were around you. And I said, wow, this is pretty special. And then I had this concept to take this little business, and somehow this little idea that I had in consolidating the automotive chemical supply chain came to fruition, and it actually happened. And,
awesome.
It's a long story. We went from a little company to getting a $10 million contract to getting a $30 million contract. And all of a sudden, I'm there.
Well, we're going to talk more about that, and Thank you for filling in the kind of the gap there where you ended up back in hometown of Elkhart. I wanted to talk. You mentioned your dad, and I wanted to talk about that because you're first generation American, and I read, but make sure I've got it right, that he came to America when he was 18 years old, emigrated to the United States. I'm curious how. Yeah, that had, as a kid of somebody who, came here, I assume, with not much and started something and grew something. How did that impact you as an entrepreneur? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot there, but curious, to hear a little bit about your family's journey and in America and Elkhart in general.
Yeah, it's being raised by an immigrant is one thing, right? Is that usually immigrants move to America because of the land of opportunity.
Right.
And they realize that there's so much to do here, and to keep your head down, do big things, make things happen is great. But then you throw in being raised by an immigrant entrepreneur who basically created something from nothing. I've always been so proud of what I would say the courage that I've heard all of the stories of my father literally coming on a boat. He chose Indiana because So when he was in India as an 18-year-old, he was deciding where he wanted to go, and he saw in a book, Indiana. And he came, of all places, to Fort Wayne, Indiana, got a degree in chemical engineering, and met a guy from Elkhart, and they started this business. And so I've just always had such a extreme gratitude, respect, and just, more than anything, just so excited that my father and the family. I've got a picture I'd love to share with you of the day my father was leaving India. And it was my grandmother, my grandfather, his sisters and brothers, seven brothers and sisters. And the look on their face says it all, because nobody was smiling.
Wow.
You have kids?
Yeah.
Imagine, I get sad when my kids go to soccer camp and they're out of the, out of the house for a week or two.
We're going around the world.
You're going around the world with a couple bucks in your pocket in a place that you don't know, before the internet or anything else. And so I think the amount of courage that it took to do that is something that is instilled in me. Yeah. Is when you think about courage.
Absolutely.
Then you think about that level of courage.
So anytime you're thinking about, oh gosh, can I do this? Or, is this going to be hard? And you think about, holy cow, how hard was it for my dad to think about coming to a new land and, new culture and trying to make it, right?
Yeah, it's kind of resonated to the theme that we are all built to do hard things.
Yeah. And so, there's a age-old question of whether people are born entrepreneurs or, can become entrepreneurs. And you obviously got to witness somebody who's incredibly entrepreneurial. And I'm sure that had an impact on your outlook and your decision. Hey, I don't necessarily want to go back and work for an investment bank or a consulting firm, but what's your take on, on how someone becomes an entrepreneur, whether they can are built for it just by DNA or culture, or any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that there's certain skill sets that maybe you're born with. It could be a personality. It could be an aversion to risk, maybe, that you don't want to do that. But I also think that your surroundings play a big role in it. And frankly, I started my first company when I was 10 years old. Ironically, we've got lemonade here. Yeah. My first company is I started a string of lemonade stands in Cleveland, Ohio, where my mother lived. My parents were divorced when I was 3. And my mother and my father both understood entrepreneurship as being kind of the path to success and freedom and opportunity.
Yeah.
So my father, who had this gigantic company, as far as I knew back then, really wasn't one to give me much.
Yeah.
And so it was earn it. And so I started my first little lemonade stand business. I had 8 stands at a tennis academy in Cleveland, Ohio. And then later in life, when I went to prep school, I started a dry cleaning and laundry service. And then when I was at IU, I was selling T-shirts and doing lawns.
We have that in common too.
Yeah.
I sold T-shirts.
I sold T-shirts, got them printed. And,
Yeah.
and so I think that it's like anything that you practice. And if you practice entrepreneurship at a young age,
Right.
You're not afraid of what can happen and actually get excited about creating things.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I want to talk a little bit about Kem Krest and what
Sure.
Kem Krest is doing today. Not many people build something, stick with it for now. You've been, doing this for, almost 30 years.
Next year will be 30.
Which is remarkable. Talk a little bit about the company. And I know I mentioned in the intro, supply chain optimization. We all got a lot more familiar with supply chains, or at least understanding the importance of supply chains, the last few years, going back to the pandemic. But talk a little bit about Kem Krest and what you do and how you do it.
Yeah, I'll give you a quick origin story. So how it all started, as I mentioned, I worked for my father, and one day he decided to take me on a sales call, and we went to General Motors, and the big GM. This is a big deal, and he was providing a product, right, a chemical. It was a fluid. And I had gone to IU, studied business school, studied pricing. And at the time at IU, we studied General Motors because they were notorious for not allowing anybody to make margin. Lopez was the vice president of purchasing. He was just kind of the guy that was putting people under. And we had gone to GM, and he was selling a product for like $7.25. Now, growing up in my father's business and being a math-minded guy, I worked in costing a lot. So I could break down the material cost of any chemical product, the cap, can, actuator, dip tube, labor, freight, all this stuff. So I could go to a Walmart and tell you roughly right, like what the bill of material cost is. So I knew that this product was probably 35 cents all day in cost. 35 cents to $7, that didn't compute. So it's a long story, but I'll shorten it, is that what I recognized was the way General Motors was handling their chemicals was it was a small little thing for them. I had this concept of consolidating the supply chain and actually being the one supplier, a tier one, that would manage all the sub-suppliers.
Okay.
And if I were to do that and to create an efficient distribution network, they were distributing it all either from the suppliers direct. So supplier in Texas is shipping things all around the country.
Yep.
And imagine the freight that costs. So I had this concept of, what if there was one company that consolidated the supply chain and managed all of it and basically brought all pricing to equilibrium? So I called on GM. I encouraged my father to let me have the pitch. He thought I was crazy. GM is not going to hand over the entire supply chain of a $30 or $40 million program to some 22-year-old kid.
Right.
So we go there, we make the sales call. The guy's like, I don't know. My dad's like, I'm sorry. Thanks for doing the call. I reminded him that we were here months ago and my dad was selling something for $7 and the material cost was only 30 cents. And the guy was upset. He's like, so you're screwing us. And then my dad is fuming. I'm talking flames are coming out of his ears. He's about to, the Bart Simpson when he gets strangled. That was happening. But I explained to him, I said, but this is the point. You didn't understand that. You didn't know that. You didn't have transparency over your own supply chain. If you trust in me, this 22-year-old expert, I think I can bring your material costs down and create a more efficient network. So he actually gave me a bucket of parts. He goes, okay, tough guy, go out and source these. And I came back with a sourcing model. I saved $1 million.
Nice.
And the stars were aligned. He needed a cost savings. That resulted in a $10 million contract. Like anything, I promised the world, I've got distribution centers. I didn't have anything.
Sure.
I had an idea in my back pocket.
Make it before you make it, right?
So they give me a contract. I had to go set up distribution centers around the country, hire people, create the technology, understand how I'm going to buy all of this inventory and manage it all.
Did you make any money on that first deal?
We actually did because I didn't know better. So I negotiated an initial startup cost.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, can you give me a few $100,000 because I need to buy the inventory, and can you make my payment terms like net 180? And they said, sure.
That's awesome.
And so, sometimes when you know too much, you wouldn't ask those things.
Exactly.
And that was really it. So fast forward, today we control and manage roughly 80% of all the automotive chemicals that go into the service center. So all the dealerships, whether it's a GM, Ford, Chrysler, Nissan, Honda, Hyundai, Ferrari, Porsche, all those fluids that you use to service your chemical, that was our core business.
Okay.
What we realized down the line was there's other things that create value. So we started doing kitting, packaging, and management of parts and accessories.
Yeah.
So I'd say roughly 40 or 50% of every accessory that goes on a Harley Davidson comes out of our Milwaukee plant.
Wow.
Recently, we acquired the industrial division of Telemann here in Carmel, Indiana.
Yeah.
And we're doing engine assembly components for Cummins. And between Chrysler and GM and others, we're their largest accessory supplier. So
that's awesome.
Parts, chemicals, accessories, all down the service bay. And we're not huge. We're not small. We're in the good middle point. We're, at 600 million, on our way to $1 billion. And we're just still trying to keep it going and trying to, figure out how we navigate value proposition in a changing and complex environment.
Well, so you mentioned you've been at it for almost 3 decades now. You're going to celebrate 30 years next year. So talk about building like a company, and there are a lot of entrepreneurs who like the multiple exits, and they build something, sell it. Then they love the process of just starting and initially getting it funded and capitalized, and then growing it, and then selling and doing it again and again. Serial entrepreneurs. You've taken a different approach where you've said, I'm going to grow something and really make something significant over a long haul. Talk about why you've decided to kind of go that route, why it's important to you to, this kind of naturally lends itself, I think, to some of the great things you do in the community in the South Bend Elkhart region. Because when you have a sustained effort like that, I mean, you automatically are impacting positively the communities you operate in. But I'm curious, that mentality, versus the other mentality.
Well, I think that there's this kind of misconception that we start businesses to sell them. And I think that misconception started in the 90s when the .com era created. Tech companies, by and large, are built to exit. Have an idea, we go out and get funding. Yeah. We're lucky enough, we get enough. If we're really lucky, it actually works. We're like, wow, this is great. Right. And then the business becomes complicated. And at that point, you need to exit so somebody can scale it and incorporate it. Well, industrials are a lot different. And again, I grew up, born and raised in Elkhart, Indiana, the home of the industrial, right? It was the RV capital of the world. It used to be van conversions. I grew up watching multi-generational leadership with business, and what I found, and I studied it. I mean, my father, it was funny. My dad, when I was at IU, I lived in Briscoe.
I did too.
Did you?
We had a lot in common.
Briscoe 2B. So every time I go to IU soccer camp with my kid, I get to go look at my room.
There.
And, back then we didn't have cell phones, right? We had the mail room.
Or
mail.
AC, by the way.
Or AC. Now they do.
Right.
So I would get down to the mailbox every so often. My father would send me a letter about how the next generation kind of screwed up the business. Or he would send me really cool things about like S.C. Johnson Wax family, like how multi-generational businesses actually can create amazing growth and trajectory, because it takes a while.
He was very thoughtful.
And,
he's feeding you this good
it's
stuff.
It's amazing, right? And I didn't recognize it or appreciate it probably at the time, but I think 30 years building a industrial company from scratch is really hard. And there's different tiers, right? You start out very entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
Then you have to learn to be a manager.
Right.
Then you have to learn to be a leader. Then you have to learn to be a strategist.
Right.
And in all of those different phases, the business does different things.
Right.
And so I guess I really love my job. I've loved being part of the business. I've loved all of the opportunities that having the business has afforded.
Yeah.
I never got into the business to, quote unquote, make money. Money's not the motivator. It's about building something. I also look at the impact that I or the organization has been able to have over so many lives.
Yeah.
And you sell the business. My father sold his company in 2005 to a big public company, and the culture changed. We went from family-owned business, knowing everybody, to a very profit-driven, quarterly results business. And so I think that there's so many different elements on why I believe keeping a business, growing a business, developing a business is a lot more satisfying than just getting a big check. Then you get a big check. I mean, these folks. Right. You get a big check, and then what do you do with it?
Right.
Like
some of them don't know what to do with their time, because they're so used to solving problems and being in the weeds, and all of a sudden You're right.
Then what do you do, right? And
right.
I'm 51 years old. I can't go anywhere.
Right.
And I love what I do. And I think that's
cool.
That's really the premise. And now, as I think I explained to you when we did a podcast, I took on a new role. As I was president operating the business, president CEO for years. I took over as CEO chairman.
Yeah.
So this is the next phase, which is how do you run a business by not being on the field? Right. So actually being able to lead leaders without actually having your hand in every decision. And I think that's the next phase of growth for me. And that's
cool. I mean, you've enjoyed all of these different phases, and each one afforded you different learning opportunities. And that's
they're hard.
Yeah,
they're definitely hard. There's a lot of beer or whatever along the way, because it's building a business is hard. And anybody that's been in it for longer than 10 years will give you sob stories about the near-death experiences.
Absolutely.
And I've had more than my share, but that's all why,
part of it.
We play games because we're going to win and lose, and hopefully you got more wins than losses at the end.
This episode is brought to you by Prolific, the growth firm, helping visionary leaders accelerate growth. This fall, we're bringing that mission to life with the Prolific Growth Summit, an exclusive one-day experience at Rally on September 24th in Indianapolis. Hear from world-class voices like Patrick Lencioni, Hobby Lobby founder David Green, Goldman Sachs Heidi Cruz, and NBA player and entrepreneur Jonathan Isaac. Join top CEOs and executives right here in our city. Learn more at prolificgrowthsummit.com.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about the leadership role that you play and have played in the community in South Bend, Elkhart region. You're a plugged-in guy, and I've known you for a while, but you stepped in and were a moderator for us at one of our events in South Bend, and you did such a great job. And it's because you're involved and engaged in the community in so many different ways. I'm curious from your perspective, like you've been in the region for so long. How in your view has the community in northern Indiana, and I keep saying South Bend Elkhart region because that's the kind of the economic development folks want us to use it that way. I grew up being called Michiana, but how has it changed over the last 30, 40 years as you've seen it, and what are some of the positive changes that you've seen?
Yeah, so going back 30 years, because that's my basic recollection, my family actually owned property on the Elkhart River downtown. And my stepmother, Deborah, was a visionary, and she looked at this industrial town and said, why on this river property do we have all this manufacturing? And so she led the Riverwalk project, which was really kind of Elkhart Development 1.0. We donated the property to the city and started the development, built bridges, cleaned up the river. She had a committee, and they had a grand vision to really redevelop all of downtown Elkhart. I think the problem was the economics were tough. To be able to get developers and real estate investors and all of these folks, you needed a different demographic, and you needed a catalyst. Along the way, we had projects. We had Horizon 1.0, which leaders gathered and tried to figure it out. And then there was CPEG, and CPEG came along, and Sean, they came along, and Chris Murphy and Scott Welch and all these great leaders were trying to figure it out. And I think it created energy, but the energy was hard to execute on until Governor Pence, Vice President Pence, and Eric Holcomb had this, and I think you were a part of this, had this genius idea of creating regional cities. And I think that honestly was the biggest catalyst for our region specifically. I can't speak for every region, but I would assume that those regions that are really flourishing today, that was the catalyst. And what did that do? Is that predating regional cities, if you lived in Elkhart, you were red, you were manufacturing. If you lived in South Bend, you were blue and you were service.
Right.
And that municipal boundary, nobody wanted to cross, because I'm Elkhart, we're cool. I'm South Bend, we're cooler. Well, regional cities forced. Money does funny things to people. Incentives create collaboration. We all got together. And we said, wow, when we look across the assets on this region, together we're pretty darn strong. And that was it. Regional cities, the first version of that, then the Ready Grants. And now when you go anywhere throughout Elkhart, South Bend, you see building, development, quality of life, education, committees, collaboration. And I love it. I'm very, very honored play a role on the South Bend Elkhart Regional Board.
Yeah.
That Bethany Hartley leads very well.
Yeah.
But prior to that, Regina led very well.
Yep.
And that to me is, I think, how we've got to where we're at.
Yeah.
And I feel awesome about it.
That's really neat. Yeah. That, you're right. I mean, I think putting that's post my involvement. I was involved with Mitch Daniels, and really it was the Pence administration to your point that put that first plan in place, the regional cities, and then as you mentioned, Governor Holcomb continued that with Ready.
Yep.
And I've heard over and over again how much that did, where there were some artificial borders and artificial, barriers that really pulled people together and said, hey, here's a pot of dollars we can go after and do some things, for the region and change the mentality. So that's pretty neat to hear that that's kind of the experience that you guys saw there. So I wanted to talk a little bit about mentors, and it's really neat. I mean, you've talked a little bit about we've talked about your father, but as you mentioned, you're in a city with some really incredible entrepreneurs over the years, and you helped put together a business hall of fame, if I've got it right, with some others. And over the years, you've been recognizing, I think, some of these folks. But are there, you mentioned earlier that, there were folks who are naturally engaged in the community and great business people. And were there any that stick out to you that really were mentors for you in the region?
Oh my gosh. It's actually a multi-dimensional question. I'm going to answer your question, but let me just say this, is that Elkhart success, I believe in we don't have enough time for this, but I'll tell you, the history of Elkhart is what I think was how things started. And I'm not going to go through all of it, but from Havilah Beardsley to Chief Pierre Moran. Do you know that story?
No.
So I'm going to tell it quickly.
Yeah.
So way back in the days, 1860s, the Pokagon tribe of the Potawatomi were the ones that, inhabited our area.
Yeah.
And there was a woman who was about to take over. She was going to be in charge of the whole area. And she was courting two men. And the man who won was Pierre Moran. The man who lost bit off Pierre Moran's nose. Well, we have Dr. Havilah Beardsley, who became friends with Pierre Moran, and he created a prosthetic nose. So back in those days, we did a land contract. And so the land contract had to be signed by the president, and that's what gave us the ability to create, cities and communities that were governed by Americans, not the Native Americans. Yeah. Well, what happened was once the land contract was signed, the white men took over, got rid of the Native Americans, and it wasn't good. They didn't make right. Well, for Elkhart County, what happened was the land contract was signed. Well, Havilah Beardsley and Pierre Moran were buddies. They did right for what they said. The community was built on trust and respect and helping each other out. So the Black Hawk Uprising was taking place, which were the Black Hawks were coming across and saying, hey, we're not going to tolerate this behavior. So while everybody was fighting wars, Elkhart remained protected. So they, at the turn of the century, could really create business and industry.
Wow.
I mention that because that same culture takes place today. So because of that, I got incredible accessibility to, one of my biggest mentors was Art Decio.
Yeah.
And Art was like my grandfather. And we'd sit and have coffee. We'd talk about stories. And again, Art wanted nothing more than the next generation to see success.
That's awesome.
And to keep Elkhart going.
Yeah.
And I had a Sunday school teacher, Craig Fulmer. And Craig went to Trinity Methodist Church. And Craig, Mr. Fulmer, would always invite me to breakfast. He'd invite me to coffee. I'm in my 20s. He got me on the Elkhart Chamber of Commerce board when I was 24 years old.
Wow.
Because he always said, look, man, anybody can make money. But if you want to make an impact, get involved in the community, number one, and go to church. Actually, in the opposite order. Go to church and get involved in the community.
That's awesome.
And so having role models that the rite of passage in Elkhart isn't just to create wealth.
Yeah.
It's to be involved. And you role model these amazing people.
Yeah.
And that's all that they did. When you read the credentials of all these people, they didn't just build businesses. The number of boards that they served on or created, the number of organizations that they created, the number of philanthropy dollars that they donated were just incredible. So I think it's the culture of where we live. Is that if you want to be an active participant. Be an active participant.
Yeah, no, it's great. And thanks for sharing that story. That's really interesting on the history of Elkhart. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it really is.
So you care a lot about education. Turning to a different topic, I know in a lot of different ways. You founded a company I mentioned that's in that space some years ago. I'm curious on your take on education in Indiana today. There was just a statistic released by the Commission on Higher Education that said now only like about 51% of high schoolers are going on to higher education. And of course, there are all kinds of jobs that we're going to need, in this state, in this country going forward. But there are some that are, it's alarming to some that, that we've fallen that far. And we think about the future industries and, when you think about your industry, we're going to need a mix of workers, of course, that have different educational, pathways and experiences. And how do you think we're doing as a state? Where do you think we need to improve as a state? Do you have any thoughts on that front as a business owner? And
I do. I have a lot of opinions, thoughts, and some data. So first, going on to post-secondary attainment, we're in the 50%. If you look at Europe, they're in the 40%.
Okay.
I think what we did as a country is we pushed going to college at all costs. And think about investments that you or your family might make and how much scrutiny and due diligence you might do on a $30, $50, $80, $100, $200,000 investment.
Right.
Then think about all the people that say, hey, I got to go to college. They come out of college strapped with debt, and they have no plan on how they're going to get a return on that investment.
Right.
Their kid did underwater basket weaving or whatever it might be.
Right.
And they never really put the dots together on how that's going to create a better future for them. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what got us a little, and that's why education is going through a little bit of a transformation right now.
For sure.
I'm Indian as a background. I mean, education is so critical. India is one of the most educated countries. Yeah. I mean, my mother, my father, they have two questions. Are you going to be a PhD or are you going to be a doctor? Right? Like that's kind of it. Right. And so I value education, and I was fortunate to have a great education. I think that we all need to do a better job of educating ourselves to know how do we leverage education from from what happens after high school. Right. And some of those are trades. Some of those are just being prepared for what the job world needs and connecting needs with capabilities and connecting those dots like Europe does.
Absolutely. I
think on the education front, though, I really do fear a little bit about Indiana. Dr. Katie Jenner is amazing. I think we have a lot of pockets of greatness throughout the state. It might not be something that everybody loves for me to say, but I think when we went to a referendum state with property tax caps, it forced public education to be good at referendums. And that's very specific to the area that you live in. Mm-hmm. If you have a demographic of older folks that are like, I don't have kids in school anymore. Why do I want to pay this tax?
Right.
Well, what happens? They don't get the referendum. The teachers don't get raises. They all move to the school district that does. Mm-hmm. And you've got this spiral. So I think, and that's why the charter schools have been developed. And I think that there's a great role for charter schools. But I also feel like there's a bit of a gap for those in inner city and urban areas that might not have access to other educational points. And so it does concern me. I believe in what Dr. Jenner's doing. I think that the state is starting to recognize the importance of education. We have to have good education in Indiana. Yeah. And frankly, if we want to talk about attraction of businesses, when you look at Site Selector magazine, that's like number 2, quality of education in that area. Right. So I don't think we're there yet. I've looked at kind of other states that have done some interesting things, but I think it's on our radar. So I hope that we administratively, societally, and culturally really start to take that very seriously.
It is a complex issue, right? And I think we're going through, as you said, a transformation and a conversation as we speak about the value of higher education and making sure that, like you said, like when somebody spends 4 years of investment or 3 or whatever the number is or 5. That there's an opportunity to have a decent ROI on that that investment. I think we're kind of going through that calculation as we speak and trying to figure it out as a state. So,
yeah. And educators are such heroes. They're superpowers, right?
Yeah.
They're the ones that are in India. When you see a teacher, you touch their feet out of respect. Like they are up there at the top. And I don't know that we give educators as much credit as they deserve for the role that they play in molding the future. So
another big topic, healthcare in the state of Indiana. You know, we've been not the healthiest state. When again you look at Site Selector magazine that you mentioned, it's one of the areas that we have a challenge where we're not a very healthy state in many ways. Our investment in public health as a state has been woefully underfunded compared to other states that spend a lot more on the public health front. And I'm just curious. You know, you run a large private company, and I know you've done some work, you know, at your company to try to help your employees, you know, better access and the things that matter when it comes to better healthcare outcomes. Any thoughts on that front?
Healthcare is a really complicated industry overall, and it's a really complicated environment. So what I've been on the Beacon Healthcare Board now for I don't know, going on 10 years between Elkhart General and Beacon Systems Board, and I've gotten as a outsider, as a layman, I've gotten to peek into how nonprofit public healthcare works. I'll say this is that bar none, if you look across Indiana, from IU Health to Beacon to Riley's down the street, we've got some of the best healthcare in the country, hands down. Best physicians, the best systems. I think part of the problem, we talk about education, part of the problem is that a lot of the problems, the challenges that we have is because of people's decisions of how they want to lead a healthier lifestyle. And so, look, health is easy, pretty much. It's just what the doctor said, like work out, eat right, get plenty of sleep, drink water, you know, other than things that might happen genetically. I don't know that we as a state have always made or promoted the best health decisions. On the other side is that when things go wrong, we've got amazing providers. You know, accessibility has been a thing. And so that's, you know, mentioning some things that we've done at Kem Krest is I'm really proud of this. We created, as I got deep into this, we created free health clinics at our facilities. So any employee, their spouse, and their children can come into our health clinic for free at any time and get free prescriptions at any time. And what we realize is, and they can be on the clock while they're doing this, we realize that usually if you're a single mom or dad and you've got kids and you're going to go to the doctor, you're going to take your kid to the doctor. You're not going to take care of you. And so how do we start to be more proactive with health screenings and, you know, just doing all of those things? I have a concierge doctor.
Yeah.
I can afford that.
Yeah.
I'm getting DEXA scans and you name it, just preemptive things. Everybody needs access to that. Yeah. So we're trying to provide more education and access. And I think that's, you know, honestly, I think that's the biggest opportunity that we have as a state is how do we provide more access?
Right. No, it's good. So one of my closing questions for you, Amish, is what gives you optimism for the state as a whole? We talked about education, healthcare. You're a business owner, and so you have a really good feel for what's happening from just ease of doing business in this state, cost of doing business in this state. What are you optimistic about for the future for the state of Indiana?
Well, I want to quote the billboard that's on a building out here that says Indiana is for winners. And what brings me optimism, honestly, is that whether you're in North Central Indiana or you're down south in Evansville or you're here, you know, in the metropolis of Indianapolis or you're out in the rural communities, we have outstanding politics, which is a weird thing to say. Nobody says we have outstanding politics. We have incredible elected officials, whether it's in the state house, governor, mayors, city councils. We have a lot of people that are dedicated in the care. We have accessibility. How easy is it to get a hold of a congressman or Todd, our senator? I mean, for anybody, not just for those that know people. It's you can walk in and you can talk to our elected officials very easily, and they care. Mm-hmm. They didn't sign up for this job for the pay. Trust me, They signed up for this job because they care about Indiana. And if you look at the history, the timeline from Mitch Daniels to Vice President Pence to Eric, we've had so many great people that are helping keep building the momentum. Our IEDC is doing great work. So I think that's a part of it. Politics aside, we've got amazing people. We've got great businesses, right? We have people that want to win. We have an entrepreneurial community. We have an entrepreneurial mindset. When you throw politics, and the only reason why I brought politics up first is because they can create the systems and programs. So ready grants, regional cities, things like that. All of the attraction efforts that they're doing, all the marketing that they're doing right now, putting Indiana on the map. I think when you combine the culture of good Hoosier values with the political support and the programming and how our state's funding some of these great programs, I don't know anybody else that's doing what we're doing. It's an easy story to brag about.
That's awesome. Well, we're going to go to what I call the speed round, off the record speed round, where I'm going to ask you a few more questions, and that you can go a little longer if you want to, but some of them are short answers. So I'll start off with your favorite movie.
Favorite movie. It's got to be the Star Wars. Anything Star Wars is, that's what I grew up on. It's never gets old.
We are a lot alike.
Yeah.
That would have been
We're twins.
That would have been mine too. Exactly. Favorite place to vacation?
Vacation. I don't know if there's a place, but I like to explore the world, and I'm more of a off the beaten path person.
Yeah.
So wherever we go, I like to go to the local markets. I like to cook. I like to go kind of hang out and experience the culture.
I didn't bring up that you have climbed Mount Kilimanjaro.
Yeah.
So that must have been an interesting one. It's not a vacation. That's hard work.
Well, mountain climbing was always a hobby, and I had to stagger it every other year to summit a mountain. So from Cotopaxi in South America to Kilimanjaro to base camp in Everest, because you forget how hard it was.
Yeah.
You need 2 years to forget about how
right.
how painfully
how you couldn't get a breath.
Yeah, exactly.
Favorite musical artist?
I'm a Deadhead, so Grateful Dead. I'm leaving to go to the Dead 60th year anniversary tour in San Francisco for 3 days.
Wow.
I've probably seen over 100 and some Grateful Dead shows.
Oh my gosh.
I play Grateful Dead songs to my kids since they were babies. That's their lullabies. So
that's awesome.
I am a Deadhead.
What's the first thing you do in the morning?
It's really about resetting and aligning my body and my aura. So I like to wake up early. I do breath work. I do yoga. I do stretching. I do a little bit of meditation.
Good for you.
I sit and think for a minute and just kind of steady it out before I have my cup of coffee. Then I have my cup of coffee, make my to-do list, and go fast.
That's awesome. I need to learn those techniques. Title of the last book you read or your favorite book? Do you have something that sticks out?
The last book I read was called 11 to 25. And it's an interesting story. I've got a daughter who's 15, and I was at an event, speaking at an event on a panel with Len, who's the CEO of ViewRail. They make these exquisite stairs. And we were just talking, and I had shared about, having I don't know what it was at the age of 15, but my baby girl, who is amazing, by the way, but is going through this challenging time. And he said, you should read this book, 11 to 25. And it's all about creating the mentor mindset for kids. But frankly, I gave it to my executive team because there's a lot of insights on how we all can be a better mentor as a manager to each other, to our organization,
awesome.
and frankly to our kids. And it was I liked it so much that I read it twice.
I'm gonna have to read that one. That sounds really good. What food can you not live without?
Oh man, I'm a sushi person. So give me some Nobu or some fresh ahi, and that's it.
Nice. Best advice you ever received?
So it's incriminating a little bit, but my father, who I love dearly, was married 4 times, almost 5. So I grew up having a lot of stepmoms. And I have his genetic tendencies of being a bit of a pain. And so my father once told me, he goes, find the person that can tolerate you and stay with them forever. And my wife and I have been married almost 20 years. She's amazing. I'm a lot to deal with. She's a saint. And she can tolerate me, and I'm so happy about it.
So I'm sitting here, I'm amazed. You and I share a lot. I'm learning things I didn't know. My father has also been married the same amount of time
as
your father. So yeah, we have a lot to talk about after this podcast.
We really do. Wow.
So this is good. Favorite sport to watch?
I love college football. That is what gets me excited. It's like a culture. I love college basketball, but frankly, my favorite sport to watch is probably my kids. They play lacrosse, they play soccer, volleyball. I'm a soccer coach. I've been a soccer coach for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
I'm leaving here to go to a coach's meeting because varsity soccer starts and I get to be the head coach. So
that's cool.
Watching my kids play is just, especially as they get older.
For sure.
And I drill in all of these things and I see them actually listening. So I love that.
So you mentioned college football. You went to IU and you went to Notre Dame.
Yes.
So last year in the playoff, which team did you really want to win?
I don't really want to answer this. All I can say is that I had events that day with the president of Notre Dame, and I had events that day with President Witten, and I did have a Notre Dame and an IU hat on. But to be honest, Notre Dame, I love Coach Freeman. He's a friend of mine. Everything about him is superior. I just love him. He's an incredible guy. Now, I love Coach Sig. I don't know him very well.
Yeah.
I looked at it as that IU already won by being in the playoffs. Notre Dame had a lot to lose. They had to go to the national championship. I didn't know if IU last year had the ability to make it to the national championship, but I had all the faith in the world that Notre Dame would. So I was cheering on Notre Dame the whole way. My kids, different kids were wearing candy stripes, so we had a mixed bag. They were kind of mad that I was all Notre Dame and they were all IU, but it was a pretty special day to watch Notre Dame and IU play.
It was very
at
special.
Notre Dame Stadium in the snow. I don't think life could have gotten better that day.
I was there too, and I was at the game that they played the last time.
You were?
Which was when I was in college.
Yeah.
I think it was 1991, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
I think it was 91. And it was the opposite. It was a really hot, warm day like it is today versus the really, really cold December day or January day. That was a lot of fun.
That was special.
That was a lot of fun. So last question for you, and that is advice you would give to a young leader who wants to be, like you, engaged, eventually be a leader in their community. Mm-hmm. What advice would you give them?
I think that a big part of it is to be engaged, you have to be engaged.
Yeah.
It's, depending on where you live. If you live in Indianapolis, I'm sure there's the YP networks and there's all of these networks.
Sure.
There's so many ways to participate. I think that for me and my kind of path forward was being able to have really good mentors and almost like supporters that help push me and introduce me. But it's because I got out of my seat and I was interested. And I think that what I'm starting to realize, I used to be the youngest guy in the room and now I'm not the youngest guy in the room. And you realize that there's guys like me and you, we're cheerleaders for this next generation.
Yeah.
So I would I go out of my way to make sure that we make everybody feel welcome and engaged and introduce them to everybody that they need to know. So I would hope that the next generation can recognize that we want you.
Absolutely.
We want you here. We are going to wrap our arms around you and help you become successful, because that's what's going to keep the state of Indiana
100%.
the best state in the country.
Yeah. Amish, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you for joining Off the Record, Indiana 250 podcast. Thanks for all you're doing in our mutual hometowns of South Bend, Elkhart, and thanks for what you're doing for the state.
Awesome.
Great to be with you.
Well, thanks for having me. Always enjoy it. Great seeing you.
Thanks, Amish. To learn more about other leaders on IBJ Media's Indiana 250 list, go to indiana250.com and look for a Page 2 feature each week in IBJ. We'll be back with the new Indiana 250 Off the Record conversation soon.
Indiana's biggest names, their most personal stories. The Business and Beyond podcast brings you one-on-one conversations with the state's top leaders in business, sports, politics, and culture. If you want to know what makes Indiana tick, this is your show. Subscribe and listen wherever you get your podcasts or at ibjpodcasts.com.
Want to give your team a real edge? The IBJ Group Plan delivers unlimited access to every story, every report, every video from IBJ and Inside Indiana Business for your whole team. Cover some or all of your employees with one simple payment. The more you add, the more you save. It's smart, it's flexible, and it saves you up to 30% off the standard rate. Already have IBJ subscribers in your office? Group up and save big. Learn more and get started now at ibj.com/group-plan.